When your prophet spirit is awakened God's way, it's going to fight against every piece of darkness in you. So if you were in a fraternity, it's going to fight against that. If you were in drugs or the occult, it's going to fight against that. If you were in the astrology, it's going to fight against that. And unless you have a strong guide or coach to help you, it's going to, so and it shows up in your soul, and your soul is dumping into your body. I often say to a lot of people that I have mentored, I said, but I'm telling you, many people are in the hospital on medication and sick or whatever, and it's nothing but God purging the soul. That debris, that psycho emotional chemical debris has got to go somewhere. And so as a prophet, you're reading the word. Come on, you in there like you got new. It's almost like injections. You're getting a whole all transfusion, and your spirit is just doing its job. Your soul is like, I'm not sure, but your body is like, I don't know what to tell you. I've been in control this long. I'm not going anywhere. But if you were in the cult, or if you were in a fraternity, you were in a fraternity. Now you know why the fraternity was a problem.
Oh, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Now you know, but back then, did you know? When did
Here,
God talk to you
here's
about it?
here's the funny story even about that.
Now I
Before,
never knew you were in a fraternity. We never talked
so,
about that.
no, I know I told somebody else, but so the funny part about it is before all that, uh, there was and I actually a while back ago into the total, and I thanked him for this. There was this young man, not my he's an associate. His name is Justin, but not the one you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
He was always I was told him I was interested, in
Mhm.
that, and he was just at that time he was just very zealous for the Lord. He
Mhm.
said, "Nah, you shouldn't do this and do that." I was like, "What are you talking about?" Because like my
It's just
purpose,
love.
yeah, because my reason for joining wasn't for everybody else,
Mhm.
because so I joined it for not only like the brotherhood, and then just they talk about historical people that are a part of it,
Mhm.
all the good works, and I was already part of this other organization called National Society of Black Engineers, and most of my friends at that time were a part of that organization.
Sure.
So I'm just like, you were already my friends,
Mhm.
why not?
Mhm.
So, but he was so zealous, he would never leave me alone about it. And he lived in St. Louis at that time. He was never leave me alone about it. So fast forward, I go through the process, and I'm telling you, God was on my behind the entire
Oh yeah,
process.
he
So
was hot.
he was like, it was like he will only let me go so far when I was doing what I was doing. He
Mhm.
said, "You will not say that prayer.
Mhm.
You won't do this. You won't." And I know it was him because I become indignant,
Mhm.
and I got my butt beat, but
Yeah.
I stood my ground.
Yeah.
But and so in that, I remember, and so in 20, I think it was like 2014, is when I finally just threw it all away.
Mhm.
I threw all of that stuff away in 2014, and those spirits came for me,
Oh yeah, they
and
do.
they came for me in the worst way. And the fraternity that I was a part of, mostly their gods are from Egypt,
Mhm.
and you learn about it.
Oh
So
yeah.
those Egyptians, God came to me,
Mhm.
and they almost took me.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and I remember I was literally, I could feel like I was so out of it that I passed out in my not my hotel, in my apartment,
Mhm.
like, and I was gasping for air. I was gasping,
Mhm.
like I felt my soul like getting ripped out of my body.
Oh yeah.
And all of a sudden I saw this angel with this big sword just go shoo,
Mm.
and I came back,
Mhm.
and I was like, okay. I said, all right. So when I hear you tell stories about the occult and what that does, I said, like, I can relate to that. I
Yeah.
know exactly what that is. So I was going through that, and then you were talking about like the ugliness of it, and
Mhm.
this is probably like my first time really sharing this part of it publicly, I should say. Is even I attempted suicide,
Mhm.
and that was in 2016, and because it was the stress of just personal life, feel like people wasn't hearing me, and because I said, Allah, my Lord, all I'm trying to do is the right
Mm.
thing, and all that different type of
But you're doing this in a vacuum. Am I
correct.
right?
Yes,
Yeah. You're doing all of this in a vacuum.
correct.
And the reason I say that because I wasn't much different, so I can relate to that part. But you're doing this in a vacuum
Mhm.
where your church can't back you. You don't have the mentor yet. You don't, or did you?
Well, Apostle Ashley or Prophet Ashley at
At
that
that
time,
point,
yeah, yeah. So
by then.
back then, but that's all I had, because I used to always say when I come to Tulsa, I always used to say this to her. I said, but when I come here, I feel safe.
Hmm.
But when I said when I go back home, I felt under attack and I would tense up.
Mm.
So because I didn't have nothing to bounce, like when I'm going through these different things, I had nothing to bounce it off of until I had my sessions.
Yeah, because you had your monthly advisement sessions.
Correct.
So let me just make sure that. So I want you to understand a couple of things happened to you. Number one, you became the new threat to the principalities in the land. That's number one. Number two, you also became the one that's getting away. We can't make that easy for you. We can't make that comfortable for you. And then number three, you were in an environment, and I don't know this other than by the Spirit, that where the prophetic was a parlor trick.
It really was.
It was a candy trick. It was not the person. So what happened was all of those people operated off their gift. You were operating off the prophet spirit. And one thing the darkness knows is where that prophet spirit is, because that's something that those princes have tangled with for a while. And so when you think about it as we're going forward, so you're taking all of this. And the reason this is important, because we've been told that anything God and anything spiritual is abstract, ethereal, and you can't feel it. There are no sensations. And you're telling us absolutely the complete opposite. So that you're saying, no, these are real beings. These are not issues. They're not puffs of smoke. These are real beings. They are fighting for their place in you because there's something in your genetic tree.
Yeah.
And you know what that is, don't you?
Yes.
Can you share that?
As in where it started?
Yeah. Where the covenant was made to get you.
My father, I would say my biological father.
Mm-hmm.
My biological father, yeah.
And how would you say that?
Because the things that he was into and the things that he's done, and just because, and even in my dreams, when I have my dreams, interpreted, it would always pop up.
Mm-hmm.
And
so was he in the occult, or was he in fraternity, or was he in crime? Was he?
He was. I don't know. I know very little about him because he wasn't the man that raised me.
Mm-hmm.
But the man who raised me, I do call my father. But he was out there.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very talented man. Matter of fact, in '84, the year I was born, he was the third fastest man in the world in the 200. So he was supposed to go to the Olympics, but instead got my mother pregnant. So, and he shunned responsibility, but my mom would tell me he was just a playboy and, just all that. And he was getting money underneath the table, all this money was getting thrown at him. And he was just out there. He was just out there. And
he was just being his dream.
Yeah.
But I think it was the one you're named after. I think that it may not have been as malicious, because sometimes when we say that, we think people are malicious or that they absolutely know what's going on, but I think it's that person. And I think it has something to do with masonry.
I wouldn't be surprised.
That's the spirit that I'm picking up. And so because that's that intelligence, but it's still that supernatural. It's still that paganistic. It's still that occultic. It's still that demonic. All of those are there because it's really, the fusion of the darkness with the light. So you were getting sick. You decided to not go with the ambulance. You did what instead?
I went home. I just went home, and the next day I felt better. Like literally, I slept it off, and I went to the gym.
So you want me to tell you what happened?
Yes.
God delivered you. He pulled those spirits out. And so if you think about how you were at church, think about what the atmosphere was, the praise, the climate of praise, the who was ministering and all of that. God took full advantage of that. And he extracted all of those spirits that he'd been gathering together, which is why you were feeling queasy sometimes, dizzy at other times, vomiting. You thought you had a cold. You don't have a cold. And then, of course, we don't want to talk about the sadness and the nostalgia, the weepiness. All of that he was pulling together and he was extracting it. And at that right moment, like you said, that right moment, you went out. But you went out because you were actually slain in the spirit, which is why he told you to get up. Because they would misread that as a sickness. You would have been prodded, pushed, pinned, medicated for something that wasn't there, because they would have to find it. Because you could rest assured Satan was going to have a satanic doctor or a paganist doctor or an unbelieving doctor, atheist, whatever, so that nobody would know it in the natural, body to body, soul, person to person, but soul to soul. God knew what was waiting for you.
That makes sense. And even when in 2016, when I tried to, and it's always something at the very drastic moment in my life, God will always still talk to me. And even in 2016, when I tried to take my life, it was just funny because again, it was the same cycle of
Mm-hmm.
personal issues and trying to be a good person at my church and trying to help the ministry I'm a part of, and people not understanding and going through all that. And I was like, I'm done. I just remember I checked out mentally. I said, I'm done. Did what I was going to do. But I remember I was driving, I was playing some music, and I turned the music off and I said, God, I cannot stop myself. I know you hear me, but I cannot stop. Please, please
Mm-hmm.
stop me. And I remember I sent a text message out to two people, and one of them responded, and it was Val.
Mm-hmm.
And he was responding back to me, and we were corresponding. And he kept asking me, "Where are you? Where are you?" And I couldn't tell him. I just wouldn't tell him. And I said, "I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I'm just a terrible person." Unbeknownst to me, while I'm driving, he was driving. He saw me in traffic. I did not know that. So I go to this random area in the middle of nowhere to go do what I'm about to do. I get out the car. VJ went boom, football tackled me. And just stopped it, and he, fussed at me for he fussed at me, and stopped it, and then one thing I know about when you talk about suicide, one thing I didn't realize how much of it's because God was hot with me, and for 2 weeks I was like sore. I'm talking about somebody felt like somebody took my body through a cheese grater and just grated me, and I couldn't I couldn't sleep. Like I was afraid to close my eyes. Like I was probably up days upon days upon days, and I knew God was hot at me, for what I did. And he just flat out told me, he said, "But what you did was selfish." He said,
and you're like, I'm suffering. What do you mean selfish? I'm trying to end my suffering. What's wrong with you, Lord?
And it took a while, and of course I'm still going through the advisements and stuff like that. But when he broke to me, he said, "But you're selfish." He said, "You didn't care who you was going to hurt." And I was like, "God, I'm sorry." He said, "Yeah, but you're still selfish." So,
but I'm gonna interject because we only have a few more minutes. Yes, we have to have you back because we haven't got to the end.
Okay.
Because my next question is going to shift us entirely. But I'm going to ask you a question. You mentioned 3 times in our short time together that it was personal issues. What type of personal issues would bring you to that state of despair? And what did you do to cause them? Because you did.
Yes.
Okay.
It was definitely rejection and getting people to understand, because how I always be like, when I get to share about what I'm going through, I'd be like, da 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 da, and then you kind of get like this whole stoic stonewall face up, or I don't get it, or all of that. And that was the main thing, because it'd be the rejection piece of it. But
personal issues beyond your witnessing and testifying, you were in stuff.
Yes.
You have relationships.
Yes.
And you think God didn't know that. Now, you can see, I'm the one who wrote the
absolutely.
dictionary.
Absolutely.
So that's why God listen to me. That's why he was blocking you.
Yes, ma'am.
Because he did not want your emission. You had a mixed stream.
Yes, ma'am.
And a mixed stream and a mixed bag. Yes, and he was really did you a favor, because he hid it so that nobody would know. But he also contained you. He pinned you in so that you would not be able to go and spread that, because you would have been picked up by another spirit. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I'm sure you got approached, because all new young prophets do. You get approached, you got invited. Didn't go, but you got invited.
I did.
And then you were scouted.
Yes.
We think that only athletes or the celebrity are scouted, but you were scouted, because I could say that because of how potently your gift woke up, how powerfully your spirit woke up, and how quickly it went from spirit instinct to intelligence to instinct to spirit. That is not a fast journey. And I'm sure it had a lot to do with you reading my work. So God, the reason you were in all of that is you cannot deny, because you don't want these people to misread the story.
Yeah.
Good as I've been to God, hard as I worked for God. So you can't deny that there were things you didn't put down. You didn't let go. And frankly, I could see why, because you went like, God didn't, he fast tracked you. Like, I can imagine you woke up in the morning wondering where you were some mornings.
There was.
That I was I where hmm? See, I understand that.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
see, that's the spirit working against the rigidity of the soul and the indulgences of the flesh. And so God spared you. And he spared you because he wanted to slow you down. And when we come back again, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I know that and having lived it. Because, see, we have a lot of our viewers out there right now
Mhm.
who are, first of all, wanting to know, okay, so he's trying to get the word out. He's trying to witness. He's trying to testify. But you were trying to use that evangelical paradigm and that pathway to do what you did prophetically. And that wasn't who you were called to be. That wasn't your calling.
No.
Remember, prophet to prophets. That's a very different call, prophet to prophets. And so we're going to talk about that. But I want you to know, in order for you and God to get this over with,
Mhm.
because you and God are still in a wrestle, you have two things that you're dealing with. One has to do with a female. Don't know who she is, don't know why, but I see her. And now that doesn't mean you fell. That doesn't mean that at all. But that means that it can be an obstacle. See, because if Satan knows your weakness, what is he going to do?
Exploited.
Exactly. And it's not that you were wrong. Trust me. Listen to me, because see, you all are going to be writing me stuff that's not true. I know y'all. But it means that it's impeding a place you won't go because you think that that will ultimately be the sacrifice you don't want. So it'll stop you from, okay, I'm gonna read my Bible instead of like I used to read it so and so time. I'm gonna read it once a week. Because every time I read my Bible, my mantle grows. Every time I read my Bible, I have more dreams. Every time I read my Bible, God and I talk more. He absorbs me more. I'm not sure I want to be totally absorbed yet. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why the purging is real. It is very real.
Hmm. Because he's purging so he can change your urging.
Mhm.
And you need to know that. So we're going to come back. Would you come back?
Absolutely.
We're going to come back. I hope you enjoyed us today. I've had a blast with Levy. Talk about a dynamic journey, my goodness. And I didn't even know him when he was going through all of this, but he knew my work. I remember the first time we talked, I said it's going to take you X amount of time for you to get tired of that church, and when you do, you'll be with me. I told you. And you're like, I remember that because we were on the phone, she was on the phone, you were on the phone with your advisor, and then I was there. And I'm telling you this because God knows how long it's going to take for you to get ready for the long road he has. And sure enough, it's so funny how circumstances kept happening to you to bring that word to pass. It was really very phenomenal from what I understand. So we'll talk about it when we come back. Okay, we're going to talk about it. Until then, thank you for joining me for this edition of Soul Call Friday, because everybody has a soul, but not every soul is in their control. Hey, see you next time. Share this with friends and sow a seed. God bless you.